Yeah, you should get a finder's fee.
No, he shouldn't. No, he actually he should not get a finder's fee. In fact,
thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that.
I'm going to charge him a foisting fee.
Hi, I'm Jim O'Shaughnessy, and welcome to Infinite Loops. Sometimes we get caught up in what feel like infinite loops when trying to figure things out. Markets go up and down, research is presented and then refuted, and we find ourselves right back where we started. The goal of this podcast is to learn how we can reset our thinking on issues that hopefully leaves us with a better understanding as to why we think the way we think and how we might be able to change that to avoid going in infinite loops of thought. We hope to offer our listeners a fresh perspective on a variety of issues and look at them through a multifaceted lens, including history, philosophy, art, science, linguistics, and yes, also through quantitative analysis. And through these discussions, help you not only become a better investor, but also become a more nuanced thinker. With each episode, we hope to bring you along with us as we learn together. Thanks for joining us. Now please enjoy this episode of Infinite Loops.
Jim O'Shaughnessy is Chairman and Co-Chief Investment Officer of O'Shaughnessy Asset Management, where Jamie Catherwood is an associate. All opinions expressed by Jim, Jamie, and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of O'Shaughnessy Asset Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Clients of O'Shaughnessy Asset Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Well, hello, everyone. It's Jim O'Shaughnessy. And wait a minute. Some mysterious individual showed up who used to do this podcast with me, like, I think 3 years ago. What's your name again, kid? It's
Jamie O'Shaughnessy.
Oh, that's it. No, not O'Shaughnessy. Mr. Catherwood, how are you? Welcome, sir. I'm delighted to have my friend Doug Boneparth, who is the head of Bonafide Wealth, which specializes in trying to help out millennials and Zoomers. Are we going to talk about that? Are you also going for Zoomers?
We're going. We're it's turtles all the way down. We're going all the way down, the generational spectrum here.
And you too chose to write a book. Very good way to tell people what you're all about, the Millennial Money Fix. Now, you wrote that with your wife, Heather, right?
Yeah, you want to have a fun experiment, write a book with your spouse.
Yeah, so I my wife edited all of my books. So like the first time that this happened, we got into almost a fist fight on the Metro North going into New York. And like I don't think I've ever been madder. And she was just like fucking pummeling me. This is horrible. Passive voice, and like just like
that sounds worse than what I did. And look, I don't know if I would do the whole write a book with your spouse thing ever again. And it was a success all the way around, and we're glad we did it. And our kids will look back at that. But what you're describing sounds far worse because you've created the whole work and then passed it off to be brutally assaulted by your better half. Yes. I'm at least getting like destroyed in real time on daily. So like it wasn't a shock. It's just perpetual, like, you're terrible, because she's she's not only smarter, but the better writer. So I'm just like, okay, I see where my expectations were set from day one.
And Jim, do you remember what the most painful argument was about? Like what section you loved that she said was bad?
Actually, Jamie, I do. And it wasn't even the book yet. It was the article I wrote for Barron's on the dogs of the Dow. And I wrote that in 1992. And I had noticed that like there were 3 books about the dogs of the Dow, but they only took the Dow back to 1973 in one and then 1950 in another. And I thought, well, it's been around since the 20s, so I should go and look up every stock that was ever in the Dow and take this back all the way to the 20s. I did that and wrote an article on spec. They didn't ask me to write it for Barron's. And I gave her the first article, and literally, Jamie, she just surgically removed my ego from me, crushed me, just like trash underneath her heel.
An entire red pen was used that day.
Yeah, it really was. And God damn it, every change she made was better. Now, she graduated summa cum laude with a journalism degree. And here, Mr. Barely has a BA in economics.
Same. Heather was summa cum laude from a J school. And I embarrassingly also graduated from a journalism school and haven't figured out how to write coherently. So I know exactly what you dealt with there, Jim. We're survivors.
We are. But, it was actually an excellent exercise for me because it was one of those wake-up calls that I had gotten. I was the editor of my school newspaper. I wrote all the time. I write all the time in journals. And I hadn't been writing for an audience, right, for years. And so I was like, she's right. I really fucking suck at this. So I went back and I got Strunk and White out again. I got Zinser on Writing Well again. I reread them all. And, as Jamie knows, Jamie's a good writer. Writing is a craft that you can learn to get better at.
Yes,
and
100%.
I needed to get better. Jamie, what do you think?
Zinser's book, my mom gave that to me when I was in high school, I think, going into college. And I absolutely love that book.
Amazing, right?
So much of what he says is exactly how I do my writing process, which is kind of get all the words on the page. And then you ultimately write 90% of what actually gets finalized when you're going through it with a red pen and getting everything.
Yeah, Missy, my wife, calls it killing your darlings. And so, she's a professional photographer. She did a book for Aperture. It sold out. I mean, she's like now being listed as one of the best photographers in the world, which I think is awesomely cool. But she does it with her photos too. Her ability to ruthlessly edit both me, but also herself is like, I was looking at, she was removing like one of the photos, which was one of my favorites, right? And I'm like, don't take that one out. And she's just like, nope, it's just too much, And I'm
it's taken me years to truly write something. No, I'm going to go to Heather for editing or suggestions and just humble myself and be okay that what's about to come my way is likely, the demolition crew for whatever it is I just did, knowing, even, and it got to the point where I would even hesitate before bringing it to her because I had a really good measure on how lazy I was being before doing that. And that would almost set the tone or dictate, how much abuse I was willing to take that afternoon and what kind of fight we were going to get ourselves into. And it's just one of those things where like you're wrong. You have no leverage. You have nothing other than yourself to blame for whatever's going to happen.
You are totally a supplicant, and you got to take what they dish out. Listen, let's get into like topic number one, because I'm fascinated by you for several reasons. One of which is humor. We've known each other for a while. We know each other in real life and everything, but so you have perfected, I think. Like you have 170,000 followers on Twitter, and you use humor extensively in your Twitter feed, which presumably is also part of your digital marketing strategy, right?
Absolutely.
And so, like, as you know, I love humor. I think if you're not entertaining people, watch out, man. Unless you're like a doctor giving a lecture. People like to be a little entertained. But my question for you, Doug, is, so I'm going to read two of your tweets. The first one I think is hysterical, and I think any client would read this and laugh, right? And you put it up, I think, today. Googling why Google had such great earnings is why Google had such great earnings. Okay, really funny. I love the way it works. It works as a joke. You could do my daughter is a stand-up comedian.
Yeah, she's good.
She could do this, right? You get 3.7 thousand likes or 3,700 likes.
So far.
All right. Okay. So here's the next one though. Okay. So the most important part of investing is to keep improving. Last week I lost 20%. This week I'm going for 40. Okay. I think that is hysterical. But my question is this just playing to the other advisors on there, and are they the guys who are smashing the like button?
That's a really good question. Like who the audience is, at least on the second one. So is that pandering to other professionals? I think a really big chunk of my audience, is financial service professionals. And I think a lot of that has to do with, those, self-deprecation type humorous tweets there. I mean, that's what it is. It's self-deprecation. It's a sentiment check as well. I know there was hurt last month, and I know, misery loves company. And if you throw if I said you lost money, I get pushback. If I said I lost money, people are like, he sucks too. So come join the party. That's almost like a Wall Street bets mentality. They specialize in that kind of humor. I don't know the last time I went deep into my analytics to try and tease out, because it does tell you by profession who your audience is. It's probably worth taking a peek. I wouldn't be shocked to learn like 47 to 60% is likely financial services. But then I'm never going to know of that who's CFPs versus CFAs, because I would tell you, I'm not here to market towards fellow CFPs. I'm here to give them humor and give them this notion that they're not alone out there, because I know how lonely it can be being a financial advisor. That's more, Doug's story. But I don't really care if it's going to other financial advisors, because that could set up an opportunity where someone wants to pick my brain for 30 minutes. And I love giving back to younger advisors who are on the come up and they want to know how I built this or how I did that. It sets up those opportunities. I mean, there's dopamine hits. Doug, you make me laugh every day. I need that in my life. That's why I'm doing this most of the time. So is it really just giving, laughs to people in financial services? I would say the majority, yeah. But it's such a big audience now where even if you took a minority portion of that crowd and we're giving jokes to people who potentially could be clients or have nothing to do with financial services, that's still likely tens of thousands of people. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So how many clients do you think that you could directly attribute to, say, Twitter or other social media, or like you have a deal with CNBC where you're on there quite a bit? Do you do that kind of segmentation? And now I'm a quant, I can't help it.
No, these are the right questions. Getting the data to determine where they came from is obviously the question we ask during a prospect meeting. Is how did you find us? Sometimes they'll tell us directly. If it's through Twitter, I usually get a "Hey, I like your feed" at the end, and they'll be mum about it the entire time. And that's usually a great indication that they're going to sign on, because they came in as fans and someone who really enjoys your content, and now they're going to the next step of wanting to potentially hire you. I always think that is a warmer lead than someone who just found you by a Google search. And SEO, is a huge part of what we're doing here, right? Winning those keywords. So there was a lot of time and at one point money being invested in making sure Millennial Financial Advisor in New York, these combinations brought you to me on first page of Google. I know how important that is to really pull the kind of business we're looking for. Far greater of importance than people DMing me saying, "Hey, can we set up a consult?" or setting up a consult through the website and saying, "Hey, I like your feed." So if I would break it out for you, I would say over the last 12 months, there's probably, I could count on two hands that are directly related to, I'm a fan of your Twitter feed. And I could count on multiple sets of hands through some combination of SEO derived from either first party content that I've created or third party content where I'm a source. And there's a huge part of the SEO online marketing play that is constantly being in the news. So through CNBC and beyond, one of my biggest assets is a huge network of writers, editors, producers across all of financial media. And that still to this day helps us keep the ball rolling on what can be a very competitive landscape on the SEO online marketing side.
So that leads me to the next and somewhat obvious question. I mean, how do you scale this? Is that a possibility? Do you expand? Do you hire other advisors? What's the plan?
Yeah, we just hired our first associate last summer.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Mr. Clifford Cornell has come to us straight out of, want to know what a risky proposition is? Hiring a 22-year-old out of college. That's a risky proposition. And some
also hiring a 24-year-old.
yeah,
How
named
old were
Jamie.
you, Jamie?
Who would be so stupid?
God, some moron, no doubt.
Jamie showed up. Yeah, Jamie showed up in my office one day, before you hired him. And
good at that.
I think,
He's good at that.
Yeah, he's really good at that. I think he was seeing you that day as well. And that was I think that was literally the start of your collaboration together. So
Yeah,
I would like to say it was, right. I was there for it. I was one of the faces.
You should get a finder's fee.
No, he shouldn't. No, he should not get a finder's fee. In fact,
thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that.
I'm going to charge him a foisting fee.
So to your question about how does it scale, about at the end of the day, it's a fairly traditional financial planning firm or boutique wealth management shop that would scale in the same way. Is probably have an easier time scaling because we rely more on technology. Our clients don't care where we are. Zoom is native to us. I'm working with a 28 to 42-year-old demographic here, literally very, very busy people who would prefer not to schlep to my office to go do something when we can just do this right here. And COVID only further demonstrated that was indeed a fact. But we have a new associate. Guy is now an investment have passed his exam, studying his CFP. I did, now I can pass on my cookie cutter model that I think really is going to work for next generation advisors to a real body here. And to see that happen and to know I was ready to do that. How can we get a 22-year-old ready to produce in short order? Because there's a big component of this is like, in our field here, you just need to live some life and get real life experience under your belt. Like you're going to do comprehensive financial planning for, 30, 40-year-olds and you're 22 and what do you know about life? You don't know shit. And now you're going to go, and I've been there. So I've been doing this since 19. So I know what it's like to get the stink eye, to get the, who are you, sit in the meetings where, when I was early in my career working with my father, I remember just clients being uncomfortable. I was there, and it's, why is he here? Is he touching money? Like what's going on? But that was where that's where the early lessons were that helped create, the guy that you're talking to right now. So we can scale it that way. The question is, how far do I want to? Clearly, I'm showing indication of wanting to continue to grow, right? If I hit a capacity constraint because it's all Doug and his VP, and now we have another advisor, how much capacity did we just allow ourselves, right? And not only that, we're kind of laying the bricks under our feet as we grow, because I have someone that needs to be molded and shaped. Reminds me of like the boiler room scene where they're like, we don't hire series. This is so antithetical to the way we do business, but like we don't hire series 7s, we train them. I'm like, we don't hire CFPs, we train them.
So I'm gonna be the guy to prove a point that what I think. I don't deal with end clients, as you know. I deal with people like you and other advisors, etc. But I have dealt with end clients, and one of the things that I recall being like the number one problem, especially if it was a couple, and I knew the wife had questions. And the husband, like when I would say, do you understand what this is? He would say yes. The look on her face would say no. And so I just got in the habit of like spelling out everything. So I'm going to ask the dumb question. Doug, I mean, gosh, what's the difference between, I interviewed a CFP, a certified financial planner, but then I heard about a guy who's a CFA, a certified financial analyst, and then I heard about an RIA firm. What the fuck?
Yeah, we've made this really easy for the public to understand who's what. I mean, no, we've done an absolutely terrible job with the amount of jargon, not just in our respective crafts, right, in financial services, but even within personal finance or corporate finance, or, you can get lost in the sauce very quickly. The great part about being a certified financial planner and someone who deals with people's personal finances is the education requirement or the duty you have to educate your clients, not just on, how to simplify jargon into terms they understand, but how to simplify their financial lives into helping them make effective and prudent financial decisions. I think it's literally part of the good planners know that this is part of your job. And I don't think you're going to be, very effective developing business if you're unable to break it down to a relatable, level. And I think in there lies the key. It's about relatability. And when you think about Bonafide Wealth in my business, what we've been very effective at, not just being a first mover in getting an underserved demographic. You go back 6 years saying you're going to go work for millennials, any manager at a shop would laugh at you and say, go home, think about what you just said, and don't bother coming back if you can't figure out that they don't have any money. We make our money on managing money. And I'm thinking, like, we also make money providing financial advice and planning. We can get to assets down the road. Let's go invest in people who have bright futures that need help today, right? So yeah, think like a capitalist, but have a little bit of a heart of a social worker here, at least when you're approaching this thing. And if it was the CFA would be someone doing a completely different function, right? You'd see a CFA in as far as wealth management goes. Yeah, I would have you in the firm here to help run portfolio, to help you or to help my clients, build out the asset management side of things. I wouldn't bring you in to discuss how your, trusts are integrating with your tax planning and why we need to, gift them right now. You'd be like, yeah, I'm looking for alpha, like.
Yeah. What the hell are you talking about? Trust here, man.
Yeah, I just bought the dip, Doug. Like, I need a bonus.
That was another one of your tweets that I loved. Did I sell the bottom? Yes. But did I also buy the top? Also, yes. So to me, obviously, because I'm in this industry, I find it really funny. I think sense of humor, I'm an old timer around here, and like Wall Street always had the best sense of humor, always. I mean, and it was always not kosher, right? It was like,
yeah, go back 30 years, not going to be good.
Honestly, I was moving house when the Challenger exploded. My business phone rang, and I picked it up, and it was a guy at undisclosed brokerage who said, I said Bud Light. Literally, I didn't even know that the Challenger had exploded. And like, he's already on the phone making jokes. And I'm like, this is yeah,
pretty messed up.
And so what I think is good about like this, so I'm a bull on all of the, what I'm calling the great reshuffle, on all of the ability to leverage technology, but also I'm a bull on like the fact that Wall Street has really cleaned up its act. It's still got more it can do, but like from the old days, oh my God. I mean, which I think is great, and I think it's transformational. I also think that there's a lot more people who, like you, helping people, because money's the last taboo, right? It seems to me. And people will openly talk about their sex lives, but man, you try to get them to talk about money. And there's just so many things like lurking in the demon dwelling area there.
Yeah.
And you'd mentioned, we have a mutual friend, Morgan Housel, and you said you really like him. And one of the things I despise Morgan. He knows it. And no, I love Morgan. He's my
biggest enemy.
He's my nemesis. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why I have all the photos of him from when he was a kid.
Oh, I love when you do that.
His wife is on my side. Take that,
for sure.
Morgan.
You post that, I text him the tweet immediately, and I am like, having a great day, buddy. Just pile on.
He also happens to be a great writer. He sold 1 million books. And I think he shares something with you, which is like, it's pretty simple, right? Consistency, goals, repeat.
It's easy to say, but doing it, humans are terrible at this, particularly with money. I'm numb to my marrow when it comes to market volatility. You do personal finance long enough, and I've been doing it 17 years. You're going to find yourself knee deep in a lot of unsavory type of life events. There was a day in my career, I packed it all up, went home, hugged my wife, and sat in my room alone. It was just a back-to-back life event from clients. That's how, as sad as it was, it involved death of a child. I forget, I've traumatized myself so much. I've probably blocked what the other event was. Oh, and it was back-to-back deaths, one of a child and the other of a adult client leaving a young child behind. And after the second one was of the child. And I looked to my staff, I said, I'm going home. And I went home and nearly lost it. Like truly, I hadn't been in, I've dealt with death in practice before and in other, as an associate or a partner of other practices, but never my own. And it was sobering. These are probably not even the words I really want to use to describe how I felt in that moment. And I bring this up because it really does play into why I use humor, not just on Twitter. This is what you see there is what you get here. It's what you get when signing up to be a client. I have to talk to you about death and incapacitation, life insurance. I have to talk about what happens if you can't be there for your kids or your spouse. And I got to tell you, getting some humor in there to soothe out what is a morbid conversation or a pretty dark matter goes a long way. I credit humor to helping me navigate client relationships a great deal. It's probably the best tool in my tool belt. Apparently, you can see this play out on a Twitter feed, but imagine how I'm able to use that in practice. And more importantly, in life with my own friendships and my own family. I think I'd just go insane if I wasn't able to laugh at stuff. I mean, life's, you could do the cliche, life's too short. The world's fucked up. All of these things, you better find a chuckle or some pharmaceuticals or not pharmaceuticals, or, some drugs to help you out here. By the way, none are mutually exclusive. But that's it. So when you say, and Morgan, who I love, and he'll deny that we're good friends to the hilt, but we are, and I have the pleasure. I
actually texted him before this, and I said, "Do you know Doug at all?" And he goes, "That guy, I have a restraining order on him."
Yeah,
just so.
Yeah. that's okay. There's a mutually assured destruction option that we could deploy.
I'm kidding, listeners. I'm kidding. Morgan does not have a restraining order on Doug.
No, he does not. And we give him a hard time because we love him so much. But enough of that guy. But yeah, he breaks it down pretty simplistically in his book and in his writing. And I think the thing we probably say together is like 70%, just made up statistic, like 70-80% of personal finances, to your point, you said a second ago, minding what you spend your money on, increasing what you make, and enjoying what you got. And if you figure these things out, but just like anything in life, you got to get, if you're going to get good at something, you got to practice it. And I think, when you think of me as a professional in the context of an accountability buddy, as someone who regularly checks in, has a written document and a plan to follow in place to handle, look, the plan's numbers and letters on a piece of paper. This is the art and the dance and the conversations and the way you can extract value from words and numbers into real life decisions. That is something that likely can never be replaced by robos, at least, never say never, but it's not anything I'm going to see get replaced anytime soon. So you better build your value on that, not the piece that is, or anything that could become commoditized. And there's a lot of things that have become commoditized.
Yeah, so I've said often that arbitraging human nature is the last sustainable edge. And it sounds to me also like what you just said. People want to talk to people. Early in my career, there was this big fight going on between load funds and no load funds, right? A load fund, the youngsters probably won't even know what a load fund is.
A shares, B shares, A, B, and C shares.
But
rights of accumulation. Now I feel
like, so literally they would charge you a huge fee to buy the fund. And like, so
5 and 3/4 under 50 grand or something like that.
Absolutely insane. So I have enumerated the many mistakes I've made. And probably I'm going to go on to some real whoppers. But one of the ones I made was Merrill Lynch. I had an arrangement with them. I was a consultant to Merrill, providing them with stocks for one of their unit investment trusts, which are fixed investment vehicles that I don't think exist anymore. They might, I don't know.
They do. They do. Don't know the last time I've seen it, but they show up every now and then in some inherited account.
So, but here's Jim, right? And like we're going to launch some mutual funds, right? And the Merrill guys are like, Jim, just launch load funds. We'll put them on the Merrill system. And I'm like, no. No loads are the future, my friends.
Yeah, you didn't make any friends at the bank that day.
But you know what? Now I'm glad that all those crazy fees are gone. But there was an argument that I scoffed at and I changed my mind about dramatically. And that was that after a certain level, whatever that level happens to be, human beings trying to figure out finances, if that's not their thing, they need another human to deal with. And believe me, I started things like Netfolio. I loved robos. I thought they were all great, but I really changed my mind on that idea just because time and time again, the people I saw not freaking out had advisors. The people I saw freaking out did not.
There it is. That's right there. And I got to sharpen my saw on that in 2008-9. Moved to New York, left South Florida, moved to New York City. I got off the plane at JFK when Lehman literally collapsed. And I'm like, shit, going home tomorrow. Like, worst possible time to move to New York City and work in finance would be October 2008. Find a worse time. That right there is, get ready for free fall. Here we go. If you had a life jacket, you were lucky. Literally dark days. So that shaped me, right, from as a professional, and got it in my mind that I'll likely see this again. Maybe not, a credit crisis in that regard in the housing market. I had no idea 2020 would be a health crisis. It could have been a health crisis, could have been a commodity crisis, could have been a bank. It didn't matter. I'd see something stupid. I remember us having lunch. And I'm just like, where is it, Jim? Right. And you were right, but also wrong because we had no idea what it was. And I don't think either of us, we would have bet a financial boo-boo or a geopolitical scuffle or something. Not, not a pandemic. That probably was not on our bingo card.
Damn it.
But yeah. And it went deeper than I think where we were discussing. But we would also never have guessed it would have bounced back with that much stimulus. Anyways, the point being here, I got it in my mind, I would deal with this again. So for literally 13 years of shaping and building myself into, the advisor in the firm that I have today, I was prepping clients in the conversations, finessing how to not terrorize anyone with, the doom is coming. Then you're a bear. I'm a bull. Right. Then you're a bear and you'll be right eventually and probably erode your reputation if you say it too long. Never a spot you want to really be in here. And here it was. It happened. It happened in the form of a 33% drawdown in a matter of what seemed like minutes. And like, game time, Doug. Like, you've trained for this. Let's go see. Let's go make sure no one sells, because you're going, worst thing you could do. Let's find out who's willing to rebalance at a minimum. That's one way to buy a dip. Who's feeling risk on? That's a second way to buy a dip. And the third is who's got the brass and the guts to go take fresh capital and throw it into these discounts here. That's meaning, hey, you got, and we were always preaching 9 to 12 month cash reserves, not 3 to 6. So that was Doug's trauma and stigma from 08-09 showing up in practice to give, I'm thinking 20, 30 something year olds trying to buy their home, start their families. They need to sleep well at night and have security in order to do all the things I want them to do. And here's what I learned. I thought I was going to be very effective given I had a decade to prep, train, plan around an event like this. And I thought I could get a lot more people than I did to take that dry powder or to really go buy with fresh capital. I got done what needed to get done, which was no one panicking and selling out of their positions and really just blowing up the strategy. I got a lot of folks to do the simple stuff like rebalance and maybe get a little bit more risk on. But and while I did get some people to say, hey, let's go take advantage of this, it was far below what I thought it would be. Maybe like 20% of the practice. I was probably shooting for double to 2.5 times that. And it just goes to show, bring out the Mike Tyson quote, everyone's got a plan until you're punched in the face. And in dealing with a pandemic, kids now at home, daycare shut down. I mean, people were grateful, clients were grateful I brought it up, but they had no appetite for something like that at the moment. And that was, I think, the biggest lesson here, because it was the behavioral lesson, right? You're really getting to see how well you train them up. Because and I did, pat myself on the back. I'm not trying to, flex hard here. I'm just trying to say, I'm actually trying to humble myself. It wasn't, it was great, but it wasn't like all-star status where I could tell you, 80% of the practice, I forced them to buy that dip. That would just be terrible, right?
Yeah. And listen, again, not my first rodeo. And like, when you see it time and time and time again, and you see human beings behaving exactly the same way, I never, as you know, I'm not a market forecaster. I'm an infinite time horizon guy. I have children and grandchildren and charities that I want to give money to. So I don't, my time horizon is forever. I would never sell the United States short. And like some pretty simple, it's easy for me, right? But like, I'm not disinterested in what people like who react emotionally. And so I almost never, other than this long-term forecast, I almost never make a forecast. Now I did in March of 2009, I wrote a thing called a generational buying opportunity, not because I had any great insight, but because the numbers were like screaming this at me, and crickets, man. I actually went down to one of our longest term advisors in Washington, DC. And I was with my rep, who normally would call on him. We step into his office, and I'm really not kidding. In a very nice office. He'd been with us for years and years and years. I take one step into his office, and he's sitting at his desk with his hand up like this. Jim, do not come any further. And he goes, what do you got in that briefcase? I've got a report I want to show you, man. And he goes, no. What you've got in that briefcase is you've got 15 charts and tables telling me categorically why this is the very best time to buy. And that's bullshit. And you're fucking lying. And I don't believe it. And like, this was a guy who could tell our story backward better than me. And like, people just like during those crunch times,
he got shook.
If you can save people during those times, man, you've earned your fee 10 times over, I think. So let's change courses here to, you've got a new venture where it's like almost building in public. We want to talk about CryptoDrip. Is this a joke or is this real?
No, it's very real, very real. And congratulations on your auction. You're out in front here. It's very, very real. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to, pump my bags here.
There you go.
I've been indoctrinated in the world of crypto, most specifically Bitcoin. I had a really smart friend who I love very dearly call me up one day shortly after getting married in 2013, start going on about hash rates and digital space money and Bitcoin. I've never in my life heard these terms ever, right. But I do know when someone's about to ask for money. It's kind of what I do.
You're right.
So I said, cut to the chase, bud. They're like, what do you want? And he's just like, $3,000 each. We're going to go buy this miner and get these Bitcoins. And I'm like, I know how to get them off the phone. Just got married, like literally didn't pay the honeymoon bill yet. And I'm like, hey, Heb, I got Seth on the phone. He wants 3Gs for some computer. What do you think? He's like, oh, Seth, yeah, smart guy. Yeah, give him the money. And it just backfired on me right there. So props to Heather. We ended up, wiring him $3,000 we probably didn't have at the time. And he secured us this miner. Here's a cool part of the story. Right to the reservation we had for putting our deposit down, we're going on eBay for $10,000. So here, it's an option, I'm like, wow, this is a nice call option we got here. I called my friend up. I said, don't be stupid, sell our rights, go take the money and go buy your stupid coins. And we would have made $2,000 each for doing nothing and same spot, because that miner is going to turn obsolete in 6 months. Its hashing power, degrades as the algorithm gets harder to solve, or the equation gets harder to solve.
Yeah.
And he was just like, nah, He's like, this, you said you're limited partner. I'm general partner. I call the shots. I just need your money. Shut up. And I'm just like, you're an idiot. But I don't, I owe him a lot. He's a good friend. I figured he wanted to set it up. He wanted to run it. He wanted to bring it, he wanted to do it. Fine. Got it up and running, put us in a pool. Hey, Doug, I visited him, Austin, Texas. We set up a digital wallet. This was all weird. My he's like, don't ever lose this passphrase. I'm talking about. And sure enough, every week we would, get our reward of Bitcoins, and I would see some Satoshis and some Bitcoins start to go into a digital wallet. And this is 2014.
Wow.
Didn't think about it for literally 3 years until everyone and their mother learned what Bitcoin was by November 2017.
Yeah.
And I remember going home for Thanksgiving and my friends looking at me, don't you have this? And I was like, oh, this is getting real. And then the other proxy was seeing clients, young clients, obviously I serve, come in the door asking 1 in 10. 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 1 in 10 would come in with questions for some kind of exposure. I remember a young couple coming in, having made $500,000 on Ethereum. And that was a game changer for them. Can you only imagine, not clients anymore, I can only imagine if they held, any of that or a good portion of that where they are now, wow, that was a while back. Anyways, going long here, I've been playing around in this space for 8 years and observing, and then these NFTs come along. Last year, I got a call from Financial Times. They're saying, hey, we're doing a documentary on NFTs. We'd love to have you in it. I'm like, absolutely. We'll come out to your neighborhood. And now I'm in it. And I didn't even own an NFT at that particular point, but I knew enough about it. And then I said, this has to stop. I learn by doing. A lot of people do. Got to get your hands dirty. And I don't think I could have really scratched the itch effectively without having gone out and bought one. Mm-hmm. So I did. I spent 3 days on OpenSea looking at one particular collection of pixelated toads that looked very groovy and had a cool vibe. And I was like, what am I doing here? And then the price started to go from like half an ETH to like 2, and I panic bought. My 3 days of due diligence was getting like blown to pieces on price action. And I totally FOMO'd like a floor cryptode. And I watched it go from 2 to 14 and obviously didn't sell. Diamond hand that thing all the way back down to 2, because you can't sell your boy. It's your toad, for crying out loud. I'm like, wow, exactly. I'm an idiot. Yeah, I'm an idiot. So I was like, okay, I get it. I think I get it. Wait, I think what I get is that if this is really about, this is what I did know. If it's about flipping JPEGs and trade action, price action, you're missing it. You're missing it because I knew that was too surface level. I knew that's what everyone was looking at. I knew if you saw a $6 million ETH rock or CryptoPunk or Bored Ape or these blue chip top tier millions of dollars going towards, in fiat worth of ETH going towards this, you're missing it because we still didn't have utility, the word utility being floated around, which is now even getting cringy, and we got to get a bet. All these words are tough to swallow now. I said, all right, I kind of get it. And then what happened with the crypto project, if you are an owner of any of these amphibious warty creatures on your screen, and what's cool about this project, it's a CCO project. It's in the public domain. I love projects like that. I guess they don't want to make money. That's cool. But at the end of the day, you can make a derivative work of it. And someone got the idea to do a DAO around toad socks, where you, by being an owner, could mint another NFT that you could burn at any time and get a real pair of socks drop shipped to you with toads on it. And it sounds, we're laughing. It sounds so silly, but that was the light bulb that went off in my head. I go, oh shit, Web 2, Web 3 bridge. People are going to love this because you never go full DeFi. You can't get masses into this space under the whole, like, we'll dork out about it. We'll nerd out about it. You go tell someone who has no idea what we're doing, and here's a point in case. Heather wanted to go buy her first NFT, Women Empowerment Project. She has a Boss Beauty, which is on the run right now. She really knows, how to pick them. But that was a cool project she wanted to get behind because it had something she could relate to. And she said, Doug, could you buy this one for me? And I said, no, I'm curious how she's good. And I know she would figure it out. Like, I'll stand over your shoulder, but here's what you need to do. Let's see if you can do it. And I want your feedback on how this goes. She did it all, looked at me, she said, there's not a girlfriend I have that would ever do what I just did. And she's going to write a piece about it because she's a great writer. And she's like, let me break that down. I said, yeah, that's a UX UI. It's a big problem. And then another light bulb went off here again, having done all of these things, saw toad socks, bought a toad, watched my wife do it. Of course, we got to go build, Jim. It wouldn't be in our nature not to go try and build something. This is what happens when you put supercomputers in everyone's hands. And that's kind of the commentary here. We've given everyone supercomputers in the palm of their hands. We've maxed out the Web 2 experience, and now we're going to integrate our real lives with our digital lives. Everyone thinks it's Ready Player One metaverse, out in some. It's not that. It's not that. I saw really good tweet threads about it. Just think integration, digital to real world, and that requires bridges between the two, because no one's jumping into the decentralized arena, head first. Right? They need to walk across some kind of connector here. It's only been 10 years of most people playing around with a smartphone or having their own supercomputer here, even PCs for that matter. Yep. So we build. And where do I exist? I exist at the intersection of personal finance, coffee, my shtick, right? Yep. And crypto, because I'm an OG and I've been in the space for 8 years. And I thought to myself, what would be there could probably be no better bridge from helping people understand and learn about this space than through coffee, because I know if you're going to build something, go after big markets. So let's talk about that market for one quick second. You got 1 billion unique coffee drinkers a day. So we got something that's 1/8 of the global population happening. Yep. They're doing something, they're doing your thing daily, not just once a day, 2.25 billion drinks per, person. Yep. So
it's a huge TAM. Yep.
Huge. What gambling fits in this category, Yep. So caffeine's a drug. No wonder it's here in this it scales up, but people have no problem with caffeine as they would, gambling or sex work or these more, sinful type activities. So you're safe with coffee. Not that I was going to do the other two. So you're safe with coffee here. And
I'm gonna edit this to make it seem like you
specifically say that. Yeah, we were thinking sex work. We were thinking gambling.
We want gambling. We want the drugs. We want pharma. We want the alcohol makers.
Yeah, we're gonna decentralize bullets in the crematorium. That's what we're doing here.
3D printer. We're gonna figure out how you do the gun and the bullets on the 3D printer.
Exactly. Yeah. It's it's gonna be fun editing here. I'm done. I'm getting canceled. So this was the thing. I'm like, I can build. I got, someone who can make graphic design, and I started drawing sketches of what you're following the blueprint of the generative, 5 to 10,000 collections, which were all the PFP projects that we're all maybe even getting a little bit sick of these days. But, that was kind of what everybody was doing. And I'm like, all right, maybe we'll do, something coffee around that. And I was just about to pull the trigger on what I had built. It was going to be 20 NFTs, small batch collection, and I was just going to put it out there and see what the response is. I have no problem. I try jokes all day long. I've written a blog for 2 years straight. You just got to get good at putting stuff out there and knowing 80% of it's going to suck. And this could have sucked. Stars align. Heather's has a connection from childhood who's knee deep in the space. And she says, hey, what are you guys up to? I follow you on Twitter, and I'm just like, let me show you a project I've been working on. And she says, wow, this is super cool. Is this what you really want it to look like? I said, no, my hands are kind of tied with how, with graphic designers here. I'm using what I got. She's like, well, I got full stack, tell me more about it. Can I show you? So it's, what? Launch it. I'll show you some stuff later on. Calls me the next day. It's like, don't launch it. Let me show you some things. And I'm like, okay, fine. I would have it look vaporwave. I'd go in the purples and the blues. And, this is what I would truly want it to be if I had that kind of ammunition. And she's like, here, what do you think of this? And my jaw dropped. She's like, all right, let's sit in this for a second. Let's think of all the ways that this could go. And now keep in mind, this is over the course of 5 months. And if you've been following NFT and Ethereum type stuff over the last 5 months, it might as well be 10 years. Like that's how fast things have been changing. Right. Yep. And we saw the first stake to earn game, Wolf game came out, and now staking was a thing to yield a token that was getting converted to ETH, and someone was making $100,000 and they shut the game down. But what's happening here in the sandbox of building and decentralizes, everyone's building their castles, and then someone opens a door. to something that hasn't been done. And everyone's like, holy shit, it can do this. And everyone goes towards that. So all of a sudden, everyone wants to build a play to earn game. They don't know the first thing about developing a game.
Right.
You know, they don't even think through the fact that like you can't do it mobile. Apple's not going to support this. And you also just don't know anything about developing a game. And the people who do have already been building something in this space well before you, because they're a lot smarter at it than you. But it shouldn't stop you from taking it. So what we're then doing is in real time, looking at all the directions this thing can go. And I actually started to get a little frustrated because I'm like, this is getting so far away from where I was 5 months ago, and just putting something out there and seeing what kind of response I get. And I can't do play to earn gaming yet. I can't do tokenomics and a DAO yet. You know, what can I practically do? And it came me full circle back to, why isn't coffee the utility? Why can't we show people that utility isn't something that's not tangible? People love stuff. They want stuff. Forever and ever will want shit and stuff, and they love it, right? You go to any conference, here, take this pressure ball, these pens.
They love it.
Love it. The wholesalers know it. You get it. You come home, give your kids 8 notebooks with, you know, asset management firms branded on it. They go to town.
Exactly. Right.
And there needs to be more of that. There needs to be more things like that. So I thought, what better on-ramp, what better bridge into decentralized in terms of decentralized and that people would understand than coffee. So CryptoDrip was made here. We're going to auction 20 unique pieces of coffee related art that I think look fantastic. And each one of them is going to come with unique coffee experience delivered to your door. You are going to, if you're into coffee or want to get into coffee, and a lot of people are and do, this is going to be super cool as an exposition of how NFTs can provide you something in the real world and educate you at the same time, as the first step before we get into generative collections of 5 to 10,000. Ultimately, where I want to get this is to a point where we can create a universal coffee reward system that sits on top of all of coffee. Imagine Starbucks rewards, but for anything having to do with coffee. You could go to your local shop in your town, fly across the country, go to another shop and be able to use these points for earning them for what you ordinarily do. Buy coffee, drink coffee. You can now do, if you worked out, augmented reality experiences. So you start to scale it out into things that maybe aren't here today. But now I've created like 3 levels of CryptoDrip that are practical, that can be done, that can demonstrate real in-life utility while the infrastructure is being built underneath our feet. And that's kind of one of the things I've learned here is everybody wants to build stuff where there's not a road paved for you to go down. So you gotta wait for the bricks to come up under feet before you do that. Layer 2, gas is a problem. The user interface and experience is a big, big problem. Discord servers and people getting, clicking on stuff that robs them of their wallet is a massive problem. This isn't stuff you want to get your sister, brother, and father to mess around in this space. And that's very exclusive. We need it to be inclusive, and I'm bullish on the space, and I can't be bullish and not say we got to get people in here. And I think in all of crypto, not just NFT, is one of the worst things I see is maximalist type thinking, which is likely the most toxic and exclusive behavior out there. Even the biggest religions in the world figured out that you should probably be nice to people when recruiting them. Right. I'll promise you heaven. I got a congregation of people who think like you and want to be here. Let's have a party. Maximalist, Bitcoin or otherwise, are like, fuck you for not knowing what we know. We don't want you here. It's like, you're trying to grow this thing, right? Because you basically are punching people in the face for showing up at the doorstep. That's not going to work. Ease up on the destruction of the US dollar and financial system as we know it. That's probably not what we want to do.
I agree. However, there is a section in Cialdini that is a viable strategy for a very, very tiny segment of the market, right? That exclusivity.
This isn't it. Yeah, this isn't it.
But I also feel compelled to ask you, do you have in this coffee venture, do you have one of our portfolio companies, which is called Bottomless?
I am a big fan of bottomless. So one of the pleasures that I've had at this stage of the game is reaching out to all the coffee brands and roasters and equipment manufacturers that I use and love, and approach them from a, hey, come take a look at what we're building over here, because that's a big facet of it. You know, this isn't, I'm building this not for the crypto people. I'm building this for coffee people. Right. I'm going around. If you just build it for the silo, you're never escaping the silo. So we're building it for the coffee population, and showing ultimately how roasters businesses can tap into something. Like Starbucks announced they're doing Web3, blockchain something or another, probably around their point system or rewards. That's so not native to them. And it doesn't get outside of just their Starbucks customers. And they got the scale to spend the money and deal with their own customer base, and they'll be all right. It won't really do anything. But if you're thinking decentralized, this has to be something for all shops. So Bottomless is someone I would love to work with. Comtier is someone I'd love to work with, because we're wanting to create a bridge between Web3 and all of these amazing brands, especially when we think about a universal reward system, the ability to white label coffee or collaborate our own coffee brand with real roasters so they can tap into a new customer base, and we can get to the point of really building out that reward, that drip token, right? And basically you can earn coffee anywhere doing the things you ordinarily do. What if you finished a 5K run up the East Side River and said, congratulations, here's some drip in 4 locations to go get yourself an iced coffee after that run?
Yeah, that's great.
You were gonna run. You were gonna run anyways.
And do you find that the crossover between your planning business and this, which is obviously a much different type of business, which I would expect, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but that you would probably advise that if they make any investment at all in this type of space, that it be de minimis, or are you very bullish and advise them to get in?
No, I advise them to educate themselves on what this space is all about, and to get the language down. I would advise, take $5-10 and put it in an exchange so you figure out the mechanics of it. I really do think you're going to get an edge if you just play around in a harmless way. I think reading articles only goes so far. We just spent a whole last segment talking about my desire to do something. No one wants to build a Web3. My clients don't want to build a Web3 project. They can, however, deposit $10 into their Coinbase Gemini account for the first time, experience that, go buy a token, learn to trust a trustless system. There's no 1-800 blockchain to call. You gotta trust math now. You should, by the way, probably always trust math and science, but that can be a new concept.
Big fan of math and science here.
I'm sure when you saw, what this was, you're like, oh, this speaks to every fiber of my body. Goodbye,
absolutely.
middleman.
I love it.
Yeah, I don't need to deal with idiots. I can deal with smart math, and it's always going to be there for me. And that, by the way, talking about human behavior, we've been trusting systems you need to trust versus systems that you don't need to trust, because that element's now removed. Do you know what a paradigm shift that is? And you're asking you're asking everyone to just jump into, this is a reason when people say the term, we are so early, right? You hear this all the time. We're so early. Most people have the connotation so early to make a big bag of money. Wrong. We're so early because the rails are being built, because the capital is being allocated, because yes, price action too. And also, you're early because most of these are going to suck and you're going to lose all your money. 95% of them going to zero. I want people to understand that's why we're so early. And to really start to break down these, almost cliche expressions we've been, few understand. Few understand what? Tell me what it is that they're not understanding. Right. And I want to be able to then educate them around that. So clients come to me 3 ways with it. Either coming with questions, hey, I heard about this. Can you get me up to speed? Or I've already allocated to this. Now what do I do? Right.
Yeah.
So it could be
that's a different kind of question.
Yeah. It could be anything. It could be negative, like, all right, we got to go do wash. There's no wash sale here. Let's go get these losses on the books. To oh shit, that's a couple 7 figures worth of value you've generated. And what do you want this to do for you? Like, what's the divestiture schedule around this? Let's go change your life and not be an idiot about it. You got goals. And then, there's the Doug, can you help allocate to me? And this is where, for all the regulators listening to this show, we don't have a good roadmap, and I would feel very uncomfortable, and I know my E&O won't support it, the solicitation of the purchase or sale of anything, cryptocurrency related. I think the most I could go or do is take an unsolicited order for like Grayscale, Bitcoin Trust. And for some, and props to Michael and their whole team, and they've obviously blown that thing way up into the sky in terms of AUM. But I'm a purist. If you're going to hold the coin, because that's the way that I came up into it. So no, I mean, I'm dying inside that the Bitcoin ETF is getting the spot ETF is getting punted here. It's reminiscent. You probably remember GLD,
I do.
Didn't JP Morgan just settle their commodities manipulation ahead of GLD coming out? There was like $40 billion in profit and a $4 billion, legal, slap on their
easy
head.
peasy, baby.
What a trade. Mr. JD knows what he's doing. These guys know what they're doing here. And yet, guess what? History repeats itself always. Here it is again.
So that leads me to another question for you. So I am of the opinion, having watched this stuff forever and ever, that the whole AMC GameStop thing.
Yeah.
Okay. People and so I watch the narrative, right? Narratives follow price, not the other way around.
Correct.
And the narrative is the little guy stuck it to the big guy. So every one of my naivete bells is going, and I'm like, that is fucking bullshit. Like, I personally know that there were, in their little chat room, half those guys worked for hedge funds, and they were what we used to call in the old days painting the tape. All right. So you agree, right? I mean, you don't buy into the little guy really stuck it to the big guy here.
So I agree with you. I think, and the thing is, you'll never know who the silent institutions were. A few guys doxed themselves, like, look, they had our best year on record. You've never heard of us, but now you will know our name because we just made a couple $2 billion,
exactly.
Doing exactly what Wall Street Bets was doing. You think you think all, this narrative that all the hedge fund, the fervor again. So I want to dissect this because I actually had, God knows how many reporters and articles and videos went on over the last 2 years where I got an opportunity to share my thoughts. I was knee deep in it from a financial media point of view. I really needed to know what I was talking about. And wow, truthfully, on the sideline, I made a few bucks. Full and fair disclosure, had a buddy call me up. He's like, AMC, I think it was pandemic. We were locked in the house. I was in Ruby's room. She's crawling around. He's like, bored out of my mind. I'm like, all right, I'll put $5,000 in AMC at like $4. Sold at like 20. Got that wrong. I was like, cool. It's $14,000 today. Go Doug. It's like, oh, I could have had $100,000 here. So there's that whole thing. But No. The part that was most interesting wasn't even the populist narrative, right? The David versus Goliath, which has its drumbeat from. It reminded me of Zuccotti Park and Occupy Wall Street. It was like the second, it was the second coming of that type of feeling. I really heard that come back. That's where crypto was really born out of, right? So now you have more of the emergence of decentralization or decentralized finance. And now here's the second coming of Occupy Wall Street. There was that. Then there was, let's go take a look at, our current infrastructure here in the financial world, because we have a system that created friction, the way that the system got jammed up and a pipe bursting and water going everywhere is one of the best analogies I heard. That's why Robinhood had to say, look, we can't fulfill these trades anymore unless we want to go out of business. It's too expensive. Right. Meanwhile, Schwab and Fidelity are like, no problems over here, boss. You fill your orders for you, not an issue. We got better connections. So, and then front and center is Robinhood and what they whose team they were on and the about face, the optics, really just the optics of the whole thing. And there's a whole other part of this, that's how awful they were at comms and communication and investor relations. And I'm an investor PR guy by academia. I'm just like, wow, they're really screwing this entire thing up.
Really?
On comms alone, like every communication to their users
Just
was
horrible, horrible,
terrible.
horrible.
I'm like, wow, bad. I'm like, I'm surprised, people aren't leaving in droves here. I mean, go check their recent stock price. It's kind of coming back to haunt them here.
Right.
So no, I didn't buy it. And you gotta believe that it was the perfect mix of network communication, because we didn't have 10 years ago million person forums like Wall Street Bets and Twitter. So now communication can flow freely.
Yep.
We have frictionless trading, zero cost, and platforms to do it. And we had liquidity. We had, access to margin, checks in people's hands. So that's how I viewed it. Like these three things all coming together, at the right time to create this whole Gamestop-AMC thing. And I'm just like, God, how is this going to end? And how it's going to end, and it's going on still, but and yeah, you start watching then you get into memes and the videos, and then you're here for the content. You're like, the guy's like $1,000 on AMC. I'm like, last I checked, there weren't new movie theaters being built on the corner. Last I checked, those new theaters weren't sold out every show. What the hell are you talking about? This is the biggest dislocation I've ever seen. And ironically, AMC's got the best shot. And it's GameStop that's like, this is just a terrible business through and through. There's no saving this thing. And these guys, are calling for $1 trillion market cap with whatever stock price they're saying. What I've learned most importantly, as a guy who jokes about whatever the narrative is of the day, usually at his own expense on Twitter, I won't make a joke about GameStop or AMC ever again. If you want to be pummeled, if you want to, lose a battle, go dunk on that, and you will have quite a base to contend with. They're not here for your humor.
No, and the challenge that I feel is that I want to do everything I can and support guys like you who are helping young people understand that investing for their future is so important, right? Yeah. So on the one hand, there's that message, right? It's a boring message, frankly. It's a very boring message. And
you hit it out. By the way, you hit it out of the park by just admitting that the boring stuff nobody wants to, the non-sexy, non-sizzle, non-action stuff. Ooh, that's where the fortune's made.
Absolutely. All day. And so that message, which I think is the most important message, like, how fucked up does it get from these guys who got inducted into these cults like AMC and Diamond Hands, and like they really believed this shit, and they really believed that, like, yes, of course AMC can become $1 trillion company. So
really
to
believe
me, okay, so that shows, again, maybe I'm being too harsh, but that shows a moronic idiocy that is irredeemable. And what I worry about is there's got to be a lot of people in there who just, like, they're looking at their phone and they're bored and they say, what the heck is going on here? And they jump in. And my point is, how do you corral the ones who are not just idiots, but who are attracted by this kind of casino-like atmosphere, and then convert them to the boring message?
Yeah, I mean, they get converted when it blows up, and they hopefully get a learning lesson that doesn't, remove them from the game altogether. That's what, as someone, let's be very, very clear. I want everyone to win. I want everyone to make money.
Of course.
Guess what's also true? Not everyone's going to win, and not everyone's going to make money, but I'm not going to root for anyone to lose it. I don't care if you're AMC, GME, and I personally believe you're out of your mind to think that. I hope you win. I have no doubt, but and also I'm not shorting the position. I'm neutral. I got no fight here, and I'm a human being, and I want you to win. If you're that passionate and that have that much conviction, the last thing you want to hear is some, CNBC guy who you probably want to rip their head off anyways, tell you otherwise. And
but let me jump in there. I mean, that makes sense. But again, like, I'm a fiduciary. I've been a fiduciary since I was in my 20s. Being a fiduciary means that I put other people's interests ahead of my own. And sometimes it means that I tell other people, don't fucking do that, because that's going to lead to bad things. Okay. And I like you. I would love it if there was some great game that could be really fun to play. And that, like, everyone started when they were 18, and by the time they were 28, they were already investing money, and they didn't even know it. That'd be great.
You would think we would have cracked that by now. And I can tell you, as someone who's created God knows how much content around personal finance, you're a big supporter of my blog. One of the most sour parts of the whole pandemic experience to me was 80 weeks in a row shut down because I had to deal with my family, and I wrote a few pieces in between. By the way, one of them happened to have been a blog post titled "The Story of Robin Hood." And I decided that was significant enough of an event, because I was watching my peers and younger do exactly what you said. So I'm just not here on your pad. I mean, I took action in the best way I knew how, using my platform to get the word out there. And what triggered me was when you learned about someone in our community's cousin, a 20-year-old who died, committed suicide because he read a $730,000 margin debt on his Robinhood account, and it just didn't refresh over the overnight cycle, and he killed himself. And I was like, fuck that. That is the worst possible thing that could have ever happened. It's both tragic and rare. 16% of suicides occur in the US because of a response to a financial problem. So it's not that, uncommon, but it's still fairly uncommon. And I started to really think about it heavily. And I said, geez, this is what happens when there's access without knowledge. This is what happens when you give people powerful tools, whether it's related to their health, their finances, or their family. And if they're not educated appropriately on it, you saw the worst possible thing play out. And they didn't even lose it wasn't even a 730,000. It wasn't even real. It wasn't even real. They thought they were in over their head. And then I was extremely critical of Robinhood here, now pairing the way that they were communicating to its user base, the way that they were marketing. There was one, be fearful when others are fearful, and greedy when others are greedy. Byron, UCLA freshman. Bro, it's not funny. It's not funny, actually. I run that joke all the time in a way that is funny and not, that hopefully has an education component to the joke. These guys are just playing right into it. That was when you had Dave Portnoy pulling Scrabble, tiles out of a bag, hyper trivializing the consequences of investing into nothing more than a casino game. Roll the dice, change your life, and ironically, he runs a gambling company. So that makes sense, I guess.
Exactly. And I, again, agree entirely. I had that person on my podcast to talk about his cousin.
Yes, you did.
It's Bill Brewster. I mean,
it's Bill. It's
Bill. He does a great job. He's got a great podcast, and he's a
great guy.
He's a great guy. Like him very much. Know him pretty well, and
I saw his pain. I saw his pain. Yeah, I saw his pain. I'm like, oh hell no, this is one of our own, where it hit home. And I was just like, And I talked to him. I said, Bill, can I write this thing? I want to make sure I'm not. He's like, no, we need that. Go for it. Got his blessing on that, because I wanted to obviously keep his feelings in mind. And it's just like, you just said you've been a fiduciary since 20. Same here, since passing my CFP in my early 20s. We don't know any other way to conduct business, to be honest with you. But you need to keep that in mind. Robinhood's not a fiduciary. Brokerage platforms are not fiduciary. You want to know what their goal is? To make money. That's their goal. They're responsible to their stakeholders and their shareholders and their investors, period. And that was pre-IPO Robinhood. They had their eye on the prize. And what's their motivation to educate their user base, they're probably going to view that as putting a stumbling block between the dollars, right?
Sure.
All right. Hey, warning, you're about to do a trade on margin. Click this article to figure out more about it before you do it. Well, what's easier for getting the dollars in the door, having that message there or not? And you have no legal obligation to do it, so no message is going to appear.
And
Ta-da!
that fits also really well with your idea of earning the right to invest. I love that because like it's a challenge, right? It's like, no, dumb fuck, you don't have the right to invest. Here's what you got to learn first. And like, that's ballsy, man.
I get flack for that one. And I'll call out my dear brother and friend by name, Tyrone, who's one of your first guests and a good friend of both of us. Tyrone and I have gotten into heated arguments on my earn the right to invest. And he'll come from the stance that access above all else. And he'll be like, that's not what I said. And it's probably not the way he said it, but the access is so important for a demographic that he is so passionate about. We're just giving that opportunity as a game changer. And I want to honor that opinion, but I'm going to stick to my guns because I'm the one saying earn the right to invest here. This is the point of investing is to stay invested. And you can't stay invested if you don't build the foundation that allows you to stay invested.
Right.
Even a market portfolio, 80-20 index fund stocks the bonds. Forget YOLOing options and crazy stuff you can do. That was done. I'm going to buy Dogecoin on Robinhood. Good luck with that. I hope you win. I sincerely do. But even the boring stuff, you can't stick with it unless you got what? You understand how money comes in and out of your life, cash flow, unless you protect risk in your life, insurance, unless you have a big understanding of the direction you're going, financial independence planning. And then if you got all that figured out, if you know cash flow, master your cash flow, build your cash reserve, get those matching contributions, take care of short-term goals like buying a home, family, starting businesses, you're in cash mode. Don't talk to, your risk is on you're placing those bets on you. That's everyone in their like late 20s to 30s, right? Then you finally, and I see this in practice, I've been doing it forever. You finally get folks to a point where, they have the reserve, they got the house, they got the kids, everything's starting to get to a point where those big cash drawdowns are no longer around. You're hitting your stride and getting into peak earning years, and it's asset accumulation time. And if you did that all right, and you did it step by step carefully, and you built out that foundation, you are going to stay invested. You've earned the right to invest. So that's where it's coming from. Do the foundational stuff, the boring stuff, the stuff your friends don't want to hear about and the news probably doesn't want to talk about. Get that in there first. Go do a YOLO trade every now and then. That's cool. That's fine. You want 5-10% of your allocation, do whatever the hell you want. Rock on. You're going to learn a lot. Hopefully you make money too. And if you don't, it's not going to bankrupt you because you got 80-90% of your wealth, in a strategy you can stick with. And you have assets and protection pieces in place to fall back on. Earn the right to invest. Everybody wants to jump into the hot, sexy sizzle. Zero commission free trading platforms with confetti. I know they don't do that anymore. It's a good joke. With confetti following from the screen, or a platform that's been around for decades. Doesn't matter. Just giving you the keys to that. It's like here's keys to the car. Don't worry about a driver's license. I wonder what's going to happen.
It's like the PJ O'Rourke joke about senators and congressmen giving them the right to tax is like giving whiskey and car keys to underage kids.
Exactly. That's where that is a really, really good, and a little knee slapper of an analogy towards what are the bad things. And I debated heavily is just people getting their fingers on something related to personal fund. Will this transition, the trading and the Robin Hoodification type stuff, is it still a net positive for turning people on to giving a damn about their financial life? Right? Can we pull a silver lining out of it to where like guys like you and I would be like, okay, that grew, financial literacy went up 10% despite, all this ridiculousness that we just saw. Would we say, I'll take it because that is so so important and creates a better society. And what we can say, we can go pat, we'll go pat each ourselves on the back and be like,
totally.
we were we had our hand in doing that, and time will tell. But I also know this, we're not going to stop pushing the ball in what we think is the right direction so people can become empowered and change their lives.
Right.
I always I never want to rob an organization or a person who's coming from a place of financial responsibility and financial literacy. It's like FIRE movement. Like, I find it cringy, but these guys are preaching what? Watch what you spend, right? Save. I mean, maybe it's a little overboard, but like, not bad. It's good. It's still rooted. It's rooted in the right thing.
Okay, so we're running out of time, and I gotta get Twitter tips from you because so I share with you the sentiment that Twitter is really hard to be good at. It is really easy to suck at Twitter.
Yes.
And so I believe in Twitter and switched everything over to social media from traditional media in about 2018. Because I believed that we were creating a global intelligence network, and that right now the probabilities are that it's Twitter, unless they just massively fuck up. And they have tried. They have really tried to
they have
things up by kicking the wrong people.
But it's
off.
durable. It's durable because they failed.
Very
so that's a good thing.
Very anti-fragile, and so. There's somebody out there listening to this, and he's like, he understands the global network function of Twitter. He understands, or she understands, that like this is how people are going to know me. So I'm, I want to get out there. Give him just a couple of tips on how not to suck on Twitter.
Oh wow! How much time do we have left? No, I'll give you definitely give you a few tips. I think one of my hottest takes is to build something first. Before, like I built Bonafide Wealth and became somewhat of a fixture in the financial media before. I took care of business first. They're like, "What are you doing on Twitter all day?" It's like, yeah, I grinded out my business for 13 years. I've earned the right to go mess around on Twitter. And if you think I'm just messing around, you're obviously not getting it. So. Find out what you're really good at, right? And here's, I guess, tip number, so that's kind of pseudo tip. Tip number 1, what do you do better than most people, right? I know, after blogging for 2.5 years that, I go look at your analytics. I had maybe 3 absolute stunners, a handful of really good. You were very helpful in helping me understand what was, because if I wrote something good, Jim responded. The feedback loop is instantaneous, right? Figure out what you're good at and focus on that. Kind of concentrate, right? You get wealthy by concentrating, not diversifying. So you probably want to find out what you're particularly good at. I learned very quickly, I'm never going to write like some of our friends and peers who are absolutely amazing at it. Like they're going to write like Morgan. Right. And by the way, that's what he literally does for a living. So unless I plan on changing careers, I'm probably never going to get there. And even if then, probably not. I'm not the best trader. I'm not a chartist. I'm not going to be showing that. I can do great videos, blah, blah, blah. I found comedy. So that's what I did. Double, triple, quadruple down on that. Thanks to guys like Ramp and the parody account. Here's all these anonymous parody accounts, and I'm thinking they're funny. Like I really do enjoy their humor. I'm way funnier. I'm that in real life. Sorry, Ramp. No, he's a great guy. We're all friends. I'm way funnier, and I'm not anonymous. Like I turned the whole. That was the thing. That's what I did different in that group. I could have been an anon comedy account and curse and say things that were not politically correct and keep my job. And that's why a lot of them are anonymous. I don't want to lose their job. They don't work in finance, but they do. Yeah, of course. I get it. Totally cool. Right. But now it's like people are like, you're a real person. I thought that was like a fake photo. It shows you how well to execute on that. Find out what you're good at and make that your thing. Build something first. Find out what you're good at in what you're building, and then translate that over to being good at that very thing on twitter.com. And the other thing I could tell you, as an immediate tip is before you dive into that thing you think you're good at, I literally networked my way into FinTwit, like shamelessly slide. I mean, it was work. I found you. I'm like, I thought of you all as Pokemon at one point. Got to catch them all. Like, I got to get these fixtures that already exist here. How can I get that follow? How can I engage? And luckily, that's in my nature as an extrovert to be a social butterfly. That's always been natural to me. Again, things you're good at. So when you think about networking, because it is a social network, what elements of networking are you good at? Also know what you're bad at, so you don't go pursue those things and go waste your time.
Right.
And also, you don't need 160, 200, 800,000 followers to make a really good use of this tool. Like if you had 1,000 followers of people you respect with knowledge that have a network for you to access, you're winning. You're winning. And it's very easy to get, you get very, very easy to get caught up in, got to get 100. I play that game. It's a toxic, messed up game. I'm really good at it, but like didn't get 1,000 likes. That's sick. That's sick behavior, Jim. But
I agree.
It creeps in.
I agree. And like total number of followers, I could care less. Likes, I could care less.
Right.
It's like
I'm jealous of that.
I just have no optimization for that. I mean, I do everything wrong on Twitter, and like it works oddly.
You're you did GIFs. Now you're doing 2 thoughts. The thing about you is the depth of knowledge that you have. I mean, talk about Renaissance type thinking from you. This is what we expect from you. I hardly read. I need to be reading more books. The only books I read are usually the ones, throughout the year. I'm like, all right, what did Jim say? I absolutely have to read this year. And it's usually, a banger. And I know I could, we've gotten to the point where I know I can DM you if I need something. But you have developed multiple shticks. You have developed multiple things that we come to rely on you for, to either make us smarter, make us laugh, to engage us. I've seen you go down all of these roads because I'm addicted to this thing. I know what everyone's doing at and by the way, if you do build a following that's big for whatever it is you're good at, I think the most powerful part of it is seeing narratives. Like it becomes almost Matrix-like. You can see sentiment and narratives. I'm not even kidding, because it's statistics, right? You now have 170,000 people in a particular field, mostly finance. I can, and you're doing it all day long. So if you haven't evolved to the point of breathing it, that's why my jokes hit, because I now know where everyone's head. I can do an instantaneous sentiment check and nail the joke, because it's jokes are timing, comedic timing.
Yep.
I'm winning because I got the timing down pat. The jokes themselves are 40 formats that I know always work. And I call that pandering jokes, versus the Google one you did at the beginning of this.
Yeah.
That was just whimsical, like, oh, cool, circular loop joke. Love it.
I'm a sucker for those.
Yeah. That's the analytics joke, right?
Right.
versus the low hanging fruit. Oh, he's doing the coffee. I remember when you said, like, Doug, let's let the coffee stuff. Like, I took it to heart. I was like, all right, what? So people are like, we want coffee jokes. I'm like, no, you get one a week.
Yeah, animals. All right.
Yeah, come on.
Here's what we're gonna. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
At the end of each of these, I make everyone emperor for a day. You can't kill anybody. You can't order anybody to do anything. You can't re-educate them, but you can incept them. And they go to sleep at night and they wake up the next morning with 2 new thoughts or behaviors or ideas. They came from you, but they think that they thought it up and they start doing it. What 2 do you got for me?
I'm going to give a shit about my financial life, and that starts today. And
that's a good one.
I need to maximize my time, because it's just the most precious commodity that I have.
Yep.
I wanted to say make your coffee at home, just to stay on brand here. But those 2 are very real and something I truly believe in.
I love it. Doug, thank you for coming on. Always fun to chat with you.
Thank you for having me. This was great.